Welcome to Becoming Parents Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Campbell. I'm a doula in Washoe County, Nevada, a Medicaid provider, a lactation educator, childbirth educator, and mom of 18. You can find me and connect on doulainreno.com. Remember, give a shout out to those who are brave enough to share their stories with us on how they have become parents. Let's dive in. Welcome to Becoming Parents Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Campbell. Today I'm here with Laura Hirsch. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm great. I'm excited to see you. This one's going to, they're all good, but this is going to be really good. I'm really excited to talk to you about the topic that I know this much about. So I would like you to just jump in and start to tell us about your parenting journey.
Okay. So I'm the mom of two young adults now. Trevor is my oldest. He's 20, just turned 26, and then Damon's 23. And Trevor was born in 1998, totally happy, healthy, ahead of his milestones on everything. Then after about a year, he started losing language, losing developmental skills that he had mastered. And at 3 years old, he was basically diagnosed with regressive autism. I mean, they didn't call it that then, they called it developmental delay, and he got into special classrooms. And back then, things were a lot different. There weren't a lot of resources like there are now. It was basically parents helping other parents. I know he was vaccine injured. I saw it happen right before my eyes. And he got sick all the time. He was screaming constantly, pulling us to get things, not speaking anymore. And it was really difficult. Then we moved to Nevada from Southern California when Damon, my youngest, was less than a year old. So we've been here for almost 23 years. So parents helped parents, mostly starting with diet, and changing their diet was huge in everything. He gained some of his language back. He felt pain, it seemed, for the first time, because gluten and dairy are like opioids to them. Like, they're numbing them constantly. That's a whole other topic. But so Trevor, I did a lot of alternative treatments for him: hyperbaric oxygen therapy, homeopathy, all these different gentler treatments for him. And he did gain some skills. He did ABA therapy for most of his life. But the thing he never gained back was language, verbal communication. And I'm going to fast forward here, but a couple of years ago, and then Damon, I started vaccinating him also. And then once I figured it out, I stopped cold turkey, because I think there's a genetic predisposition there and then an environmental trigger. I saw him having a few symptoms, gut issues, eczema, cradle cap, like a lot of parents do, tell the same story. And then I stopped and I said, I'm not going to have play Russian roulette with him. And so we've been all natural on everything since then. And I've been on a journey to help my son, Trevor, regain most of what he lost.
Can I jump in and say something here?
Absolutely.
I have a 25-year-old son that's autistic also.
Oh, I did not know
that. And I adopted him. I got him when he was 2. I didn't vaccinate my own kids, but in foster care, not only was he vaccinated, but he came from a household with so much neglect. I often wonder if that neglect was part of the environmental trigger for his autism. Anyway, yeah. I did the same thing though. All the therapies, there's no information. You don't even know for sure we didn't know for sure until kindergarten if he was autistic. And still, like, the testing was terrible back then. It was awful.
Yeah.
So man, I feel you. And I was in Nevada when he was in kindergarten, and holy cow, it's tough. Sorry, yeah. Continue. Like, I feel your pain so hard right now. Keep going.
Yeah. So fast forward, after Trevor's done with high school, I was looking for some things for him to do. And he started taking piano lessons and singing lessons. And with a friend of mine, she was doing it with her grandkids, and she thought it would be something really good for him. And he just mastered it. Like, his favorite song when he was a little boy was Puff the Magic Dragon. And
Mhm.
that was my goal for him, was to learn how to sing and play Puff the Magic Dragon, because her piano is called a clavinova, and we have one now too. But it has pre-recorded songs on it that you can follow the lights, and it kind of waits for you, and it's a really good training tool to learn how to do it up to speed. So after not too long, a few months, he was able to sing and play Puff the Magic Dragon by himself and other songs. Like, he was learning the notes, he was singing. So here's a person who can't speak much, but can sing and play the piano. And at the time, I was working for Dr. Randall Gates, who's Trevor's functional neurologist. And I asked him, he came to watch Trevor do that. And I said, how is it that he can sing and play music, but he can't speak? And he said, it's a different part of the brain. And so that part of the brain probably wasn't as damaged as where the speech, where language comes from. All right. So then after that, during the piano lessons and singing lessons, I learned about a book called Underestimated by J.B. Hanley and his son, Jamie Hanley, who are part of Generation Rescue. And Jamie's very similar to Trevor. He didn't speak much. JB did everything under the sun to try to help Jamie get his health, back. And so I watched an interview with them, and I was watching Jamie do spelling to communicate, which he was spelling instead of speaking what was in his mind. And so
Wow.
basically, there's a letterboard involved. I grabbed the wrong one. I grabbed the number board, but it's basically a handheld ABC letterboard. And it's a progression of boards that you do lessons with the person. And it's not training them how to speak, or to spell rather, it's teaching them motor movement. Because what they've found is most of these kids that have nonverbal or semi-verbal, non-speaking, minimally speaking autism, the disability is apraxia, which is the inability to get what's in your brain into your mouth. So this Elizabeth Vossler, who's the one who started Spelling to Communicate in Herndon, Virginia, I always say she cracked the code on nonverbal autism and moved it from a small motor skill to a large motor skill by using the arm to poke out the letters. And there's a spelling partner, which is me. We did it over Zoom to teach me how to do it. And then I would facilitate lessons with him on my own. And again, within a short period of time, he was what is called an open speller. So it starts, it's progressions, starts with doing lessons, just doing spelling words, then answering questions that were within the lesson, then prior knowledge questions, which are things that they know that weren't in the lesson. That gets really interesting. And then
Okay.
math, and then open spelling, which is their opinions, their ideas. And I
Okay.
literally feel like I have met a new person.
I bet, because it's the personality doesn't like autism's so crazy. My son is verbal, he's moderate, it's Asperger's. And so he can talk a little too much, maybe sometimes, because, but I think the overwhelm of their situation and the stimulus and like how they process things, it's really hard to just learn who they are the same way you would another child or young adult. It's not the same at all. So I want to hear more about that.
Yeah. All right. So so he's actually the one who came up with the idea to write a book. He must have known, like, he's a little sponge absorbing everything in his life, his whole life, but no ability to talk himself.
Oh, it would drive me nuts. I can't even
Right.
imagine that.
How frustrating, right?
Yep.
So after doing Spelling to Communicate for a while, and he was an open speller, I said, we still do lessons sometimes. And I said, name an altruistic thing you would like to do in your life. And he spelled, I want to write a book with you. And I had written other books, so I'm sure he knew that I could write his story. And I didn't jump on it right away. And then another time, a few months later, he said it again, but this time he expanded and he said, I want to write a book with you about my life to inspire others. And how could I not after he said that? So I just had notebook after notebook after notebook of everything he spelled. And a lot of it was just organizing everything and getting it out there. But then the other part, so the book's basically More Than Meets the Eye. That's our book we did together.
Yes.
And it's broken up into three parts. So first it's the music, then it's the spelling to communicate. But then, which to me is the most amazing piece of this whole story, is he started we started going to different healing modalities that he loves getting healings done. Like we went to the energy enhancement system a lot of times and this other modality called the tachyon chamber. And I'd always ask him, what did you experience while you were in there? And he would always say that he'd talk to his angels, that he was talking to dead people. Like he's a medium. I didn't know this, but he talks to people that have passed on, and gave me messages from them that were like, even my brother-in-law passed away during the writing of the book. Trevor had not seen him in 10 years and knew before I told him that he died. Like I said, did someone in our family recently pass away? And he spelled, yes, Uncle Timmy. I can talk to him. He's with Grandpa Hirsch. Like, wow. And he's also a horse whisperer, I found out. He started riding horses a few years ago and would spell to me that he talks to his horse. He's on his second. He had Blackjack, and he rode Blackjack for a long time. Most of the stories in the book are with Blackjack. When I know it became real was when he spelled to me that Blackjack was sad because Buck died, who was another horse that Trevor had ridden. And no one told Trevor that. And then a few months later, another horse, Sully, who was right next to Blackjack, also passed away. No one told him this. And I said, did you overhear someone talk about it? How did you know that? And he said, Blackjack told me. Just story after story after story of like evidence, I guess you would call it, that he's really doing this. And it's just, I think a lot of our kids have this ability because they had no voice for
Mm.
so long. Like, who else could they connect with? And it's just been an incredible eye-opening experience to see who my son has been all along.
When did you start this program? How old was he when you started?
Spelling to Communicate. He
Yeah.
was, I think 23. It was 3 years ago. He was,
Okay, it was recent. What was, I mean, I have my own perspective on this, but what was life raising a child with autism who is non-communicative like, and the difference with his younger brother? What was the family dynamic like? I don't think people understand what it's like to live with and raise a child with autism.
yeah, well, I'm very blessed that my mom's been living with us since
Mm.
Trevor was born. So she's been like a
Okay.
second mother to him. And my kid's dad and I have been married and divorced twice over the course of our raising them. So he wasn't that involved with raising them. We're together again now. But Damon, uh, my younger son, it was a totally different experience. Like Trevor
Yeah.
had special needs, obviously. So Damon sometimes felt like Trevor got all the attention, and I'd always tell him it's not because I love you less, it's because his needs are greater. So I'd always try to do special things with just him and I. Let's go to a movie together. And luckily my mom was able to be here to watch Trevor and help him because a lot of people don't have that.
Right.
So it was a very different way of raising both of the boys, but I think Damon actually benefited a lot from that. One, I feel like his brother saved him from becoming autistic himself by me learning about what I needed to learn and changed the course of Damon's life. He
Yeah.
eats healthy food. We all do. Like I was in the movie Genetic Roulette, also about GMO foods, the dangers of GMOs. So it was like everything shifted when Trevor got sick. And I changed everything for everyone. What we used for cleaning products,
Mm.
products for the skin, like everything was clean and natural and non-organic, or organic and not toxic. So
I mean, that was, I'm grateful that I was doing those things regardless, not because of autism. Because like I said, we adopted Nikki when he was 2, and we didn't really get much help or diagnosis until he was 5. And even then, I mean, back then it was so hard. You had to advocate so hard for your kids. So I was accidentally or personality wise doing all of the organic stuff and the no cleaner, natural cleaners and all of that. Which, now looking back, that could have significantly impacted him in a very negative way had I not just by fluke. That was just what I did, right? And the other thing about the kids, yeah, I mean, you know, my autistic son took the most time and energy and I felt the most helpless. And those things made him harder than
Hmm.
the other kids, not harder because he did something wrong or was manipulative, or like just the time and energy and the different situation. And you couldn't like put it off
Yeah.
when an autistic child is having a meltdown or needs something, or it's like it's much more urgent, and so all the other kids get put on the back burner
Hmm.
because you have to focus on this right now. And we've had conversations about that growing up. Nobody resented their brother for being autistic, but they struggled with feeling like they were as important, even though you go above and beyond and you really try and you have conversations and you're very open and they understand the situation. It's still easy for the other siblings to feel like they're kind of getting the short end of the stick. They're getting the leftovers. And that's, of course, not at all as parents we want our kids to feel. So I
Yeah.
definitely resonate with that. And I kind of asked that because, having autistic kids, wouldn't it be great if they were all only children? You didn't split anything with anybody else. You didn't have to split your time and your energy. And it doesn't work that way. What did you do as far as advocating in the schools? And did you hear about UNR's UCAN project?
I have not heard about that, but
Okay.
as far as the school district goes, he was in regular public school for elementary school, and then in like middle school for 4 years, he went to Newton Learning Center, which is a school for
Mm.
with autism, and he just did amazing there. I love those people so much. And then once he got back into high school because I couldn't afford it. It was during the one of the divorces, so that was something I couldn't afford anymore. So he went to public high school and he actually did really well. I mean, he went to Spanish Springs. That's the largest school, like
Yeah.
2,000 kids or something, but both of my boys went there and I was surprised how well he did because of his sound sensitivity, but I just felt like he kind of like the family dynamic. He kind of wasn't as needy as some of the other kids in the classroom, so he kind of got the short end of the stick there. But I think it was,
Oh,
you know,
okay.
he got, you know what I mean? So he did well and graduated, and they both graduated in 2020, the year that made history, they call it.
Oh my
Like,
gosh. I had a son. That was the worst. I had a daughter that graduated that year. That was terrible.
yeah,
Okay.
drive
So
around the
yes.
school to get the diploma kind of thing. But now I think it's even more challenging with the spelling to communicate, trying to get that into school districts for these kids. I don't know of anyone in this area that's doing spelling to communicate. Kids can start younger. Like I mean, Trevor didn't start till he was in his 20s. But there's a movie called Spellers, and it's about 8 kids, just like Trevor, who learned how to do spelling to communicate. And they were on the show The High Wire with Del Bigtree. They had a panel of the spellers there and asked them all the same questions. When could you have started doing S2C? And they all said like 4 or 5 years old. I mean, can you
Oh
imagine
yes. Oh
how much
no.
better everybody's life would be if they could learn this skill when they're young? It wasn't available then when Trevor was younger, but now it's given him so much freedom. And I mean, he said once to me, I said, how was life before communication and after communication? And he said, before communication, I was so frustrated. And after communication, I am finally free. I
Oh my
mean,
gosh.
life changing for
Holy
everybody.
cow.
Yeah.
My son's verbal, but and I feel like communicating accurately is still a challenge if they get anxiety or feel overwhelmed or on the spot, and having a better way to communicate, even if they can talk,
Right.
would still be. Yeah. And my son wanted to write a book, and it was so good. He was writing nonfiction. And I'm like, sure, I'll read it, not thinking much of anything. And then I started reading and I was like, who is this? Where is this coming from? Like, this is so good. And I would have felt that way no matter autism or not. But coming from someone who struggled to express himself, the book
Hmm.
was like, I just very, it was so unexpected. So I just think, yeah, of course, 4 or 5, 3, start them on it like today.
Yeah.
Because even when they can communicate, that doesn't mean it comes easily. It's
Right.
still, there's still so many barriers when they, and look, I feel grateful that my son can communicate, that he can talk. I know
Mhm.
that that is a level of difficulty in your situation that I didn't have to experience, but him saying that he felt free afterwards, I would think all the kids that struggle with this, that have autism, would feel that same thing at varying levels,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine just going through life not being able to get like share my ideas, my thoughts, what hurt me, what I was going through. It just no wonder they have meltdowns all the time. They're
Yeah.
totally frustrated all the time. So it's
I
been a
think,
real miracle. And I just want to
yeah,
share his story to share like that this is a possibility for parents. It takes work. I'm not gonna lie. Took many, many, many hours of us sitting in the chair together.
that was my
But
next question. Tell me
yeah.
about the writing process.
Well, the writing process I was talking about the actual teaching him
Oh,
how
teaching
to
him.
communicate.
Okay. Yes.
And so that was just incredible in and of itself. Every single time we'd spell, I was so dumbfounded, like, oh my God, I called him Trevor Stories. And my friend Mary, that was the one that got us into the piano and also into S2C, she brought the book to me the same day I saw the video about it. I'm like, this is synchronicity. He has to do this. Anyway, I'd call her up and I go, I got another Trevor story for you. And every time she's like, you have to stop being surprised. And I'm like, I am never going to stop being surprised because he's just blowing my mind every single time we spell. Because this is it's like I've met a new person. I always say that, but it's true. And he's been just so calm now and regulated and just you can tell he knows he's smart and everyone around him knows he's really a smart person that he was underestimated just like, Jamie Hanley titled his book Underestimated. And how many of our kids are underestimated that a lot of them are just these genius minds that don't have a way to get what's in their mind into their mouth. I mean, it seems very simple, and it kind of is, but I mean, once he was an open speller, he didn't feel like he needed to do the lessons anymore. But he
Okay.
did tell me during a lesson that his favorite band was Duran Duran, which
Mhm.
is one of my favorite bands. And I'm always playing music, and I didn't know how much he really knew about music in general and artists and everything. And that was another huge surprise. Like he knew all the band members of Duran Duran, spelled their names. Who's the lead singer? Simon Le Bon. Who's the keyboardist? Nick Rhodes. Who's the guitarist? Or Andy Taylor, John Taylor, and Roger Taylor. Are they related? No. I mean, stuff like that. That
Yeah.
he just knowing all this, and I had no idea the whole time.
I
20
think
some.
about, toddlers who can talk, but just get pissed all the time, like because they want the cookie before breakfast or because you didn't make them for lunch what they wanted or you cut their sandwich wrong. Like really small things that will set them off. And then imagining a human being for 20 plus years who can never even tell you that he wants you to cut his sandwich differently or he like the littlest things you couldn't even express, and that's what makes my brain explode. I mean, I would everything, it's everything, every little thing that you would want to say or express and never being able like, "Can you scratch my back?"
Yeah.
I
I mean,
just
he's had, there's other ways to communicate
there
besides
are, there
music,
are.
obviously. And he and I had, we did have a really good nonverbal, like we could almost read each other's minds and emotions and kind of knew what each other was thinking and feeling just as a mother, that we have that bond. But it was nothing like S2C. Like I had no idea. I didn't know what I didn't know, not
Right,
just about him, but what he knew. And he's very
right.
smart in math. I had no idea how brilliant he was at math. Like there'd be these equations, and I'm not good in math. That's like my least favorite subject in the world. But he blew me away. I was like, oh my God, how did you know that answer? You didn't even do the steps to get to the answer. But he was doing like geometry and finding the triangle, x equals what? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I failed geometry. How are you my kid?
I adore you. That's I mean, but seriously, how?
Yeah, I
When
mean,
you started the program and you heard about it and got it that same day, you must have been like chomping at the bit to get started.
oh yeah.
Were Tell me about the learning curve for that for you and how excited or not excited he was in the beginning. Because at first it's like you don't know it's going to work until it starts to work. So what was that portion like? And did you let him stop doing the lessons because he didn't feel like he need? I could see that happening too. Like,
Yeah.
I'm good, I got it.
Well, we first did a Zoom call with the person that's in Southern California. We call her Gloria in the book,
Okay.
because she's kind of shy and doesn't want to have everybody like
Okay.
coming after her or whatever. So anyway, she included him on the Zoom call and presumed competence. That's a big thing in S2C is presuming competence in these kids. And she included him in the conversation. She knew he understood everything she was saying, got his, you want to do this? Yes. And just showed him what it was about, other people doing it. And so he was on board from the jump and was excited about it. There was a little waiting list to get the letterboards because so many people, after seeing JB and Jamie Hanley and started reading the book, they couldn't make them fast enough. Everybody wanted to get in
Oh,
on it. And so we had to wait a few months actually for the boards. And then we started doing the Zoom calls. And that it's a lot of training the parent. They call us CRPs, communication regulation partner. It's training us how to flip through the boards, how to, guide their motor. Like you have at the beginning, it's cueing too, like you're going up, 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 over, over. So it's not phonetic, like you're not saying, telling them what letter it is by sounding it out. You're doing it motor planning, like motor coaching, like up, up, up in the corner, down one, over, 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 next door, and then, like, so and then you fade that back. It's kind of like training wheels on a bike. Like they have the prompts and then the prompts fade. And then once they're open, there's no prompts. It's just them. Their eye looks to the letter, they point to the letter. Their eye look to the next letter, they point to the next letter. And I sound out what he's pointing at. So it's a lot different at the end than at the beginning, what it looks like. But just insanely, the coolest thing that's ever happened to him. Like,
okay.
I'm just so glad that I've found it and we've been doing it. And what I was getting at that I didn't finish was the Duran Duran lesson. So
Oh, yes.
that her son was in the movie Spellers. April Bowden now writes lessons, and she wrote a specific lesson about Duran Duran for Trevor after learning how he loved Duran Duran. And he just loved it. I've never seen him come upstairs faster and sit in that chair than when we did the Duran Duran lesson. And it took like 3 times. We'd do it about an hour at a time. And afterward, I said, "Is there anything that you'd like to say to April about writing this lesson?" And he said, "Thank you. I loved it." And I said, "Is there any other band you'd want to like have her write a lesson about?" And he spelled Tool,
Oh my
which
gosh. That's a
is,
big difference.
and I love Tool, and it's been, and I can understand why he would like them because they're very mathematical,
They are
and
very mathematical.
yeah,
I've been to 2 of their concerts and I do not like hard rock, like the music, but I could sit and watch the guitarist and the drummer for
yeah,
hours. I mean, they're all
they're,
classically trained. They are very mathematical. They're intensely talented. And so I get that from that perspective. Like, don't love that genre, but man, I get that. I get how he would be drawn to that. You're totally right.
yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen them 3 times live. I like their side bands, for a Perfect Circle, and he knew that I liked all those bands. Like he knows what he's been hearing his whole life musically. One time
Yeah.
he spelled um, it was a lesson on grunge music from April wrote that one too, and I said this was an open question. I said, "Can you name one song on the singles soundtrack?" And he spelled "Seasons" by Chris Cornell. How did he know
Oh,
that? Like, because if a song comes up, it shows like on my phone, like the best of Chris Cornell. It doesn't show the single soundtrack in the
right.
background. Unless it was back in the day when we listened to CDs and the
Right.
CD was on in the car, front, start to finish. I mean, that's possible, but
Holy cow. Writing the book,
mhm.
how did you have to do 1 hour a day increments? How easy or what were the challenges in writing that? Because it's pretty big. It's not like
Yeah.
2,000 words. This thing is thick.
Yeah.
What was that process like? And was he ever discouraged by the process?
Well, the words are his, and it's his story. It's all about the spelling, but I organized the whole book. He wasn't like really writing it with me, but it's his
Got
words.
it.
It's his story about the music. It's his story, that all the things he spelled, his what he spelled with all the horse whisperer conversations. Like those are his words, but that's why he wanted me to write it for him. He says, I know he spelled, I know, why did you ask me to write the book? And he said, because I know you've written books before and you could share my story. So I've written 4 or 5 other books, so he knew about that. And usually it was just, I'm very organized. So when he was eating dinner, I said, I'm going to do 5 pages a day. So it just started, in a chronological fashion, wrote it all out. And it went really fast. I had it done in less than a year. And we were still spelling
Wow.
while I was writing. And a lot of things came to fruition during the writing of the book that are included in the book. So it was just,
Wow.
how do
I
you eat
mean,
an elephant? A bite at a time.
yeah, exactly. You can't eat an elephant in one bite. I wrote a book and it was a full-time job and I did it in 4.5 months. And I know how much that took to do that. And so I can't imagine doing this process in less than that's just phenomenal for anyone, let alone in this situation.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think? I kind of want to wrap up on what advice would you give parents in your situation, other than obviously getting a hold of this as early as possible? What
Yeah.
advice would you give them, or what's the highlight, or I don't know, what positive thing can you tell from one mom to another?
Well, I would say, first of all, not to give up hope.
Mm.
This is a newer area that a lot of kids are succeeding at this. It's not, Trevor's not an anomaly. A lot of kids that the parents think, oh, my kid couldn't do that. And lo and behold, they can. They can't sit still that long. They're going to stim the whole time. But listening looks different to them than it looks to us. Like if Trevor's over there verbally making sounds, he's still listening the whole time. I mean, I thought the same thing. I'm like, is he really going to be able to do this? And he blew it out of the park. So I would also say to watch the movie Spellers. It's on YouTube for free now. It's I cried through the whole movie. I've watched it
Mm.
3 times now. I'm friends with a lot of the parents and the kids in the movie now, and they're just so inspirational just to see what's possible. And I mean, my book too, it's another
Mhm.
example of what's possible. This isn't a life sentence for them. And there's even newer technologies coming out where you they're doing testing with eye movements instead of using your arm. Like you can look at the letterboard and it'll say what you spelled with your eyes.
Wow.
So there's going to be all new technology for these kids to have, like to bring to, say, a doctor's appointment. They don't have to have their CRP. There's going to be new things coming
Mhm.
up and they're already in the works. But the younger you start, the better. Like at anything with our kids, the diet, start it as soon as you can, start an early intervention as soon as you can. But I think the physical stuff is also really huge, having them healthy and not have a lot of physical issues so that they can sit and spell, be regulated long enough to do it. Um,
Yeah.
Also, let's see what else. There was another docu-series that came out after the Spellers movie that kind of took other kids that were doing spelling to communicate that had Down syndrome, and they are doing very successful with it as well. They talk about ocular apraxia and work with developmental optometry, because a lot of it is
Wow.
those types of things too. So there's a couple websites you can go on to that talk about S2C. The original one that we worked with was Spelling to Communicate, which is i-asc.org. They have free lessons on there. They have all the new technology and everything I was just talking about on there. There was a branch off of that called Spellers, and there's a Spellers movement. There's 2 centers. One's in San Diego, one's in Tampa. Dawn Marie is the one that's down in San Diego. She was in the Spellers movie, worked with a lot of the Spellers. You can do remote or you can go in person. So if a parent wants to do it themselves, they can learn to do it themselves with their child, or they can have someone else work with them. So there's a lot of options,
Wow.
but
Laura,
don't
thank
lose
you
hope.
so much. Don't lose hope. Thank you so much for being on and sharing this. This is really incredible.
Thank you for having me. I mean, there's so much more to the story and so much more than meets the eye.